Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and it's Billboard Breakdown. So, it looks like the charts have finally settled down for a little bit heading into the summer. And that means, at least for me, things seem pretty much normal. Hell, the big shifts that I expected coming off of records that I thought might have a chance to cross over to the Hot 100, well, that didn't happen. Instead, for once, things look straightforward, or at the very least a little bit predictable, especially when we get to our list of our new arrivals. But before we get there, our top 10. And right now, I don't see Despacito by Louis Fonsi, Daddy Yankee, and yes, the remix courtesy of Justin Bieber going anywhere. It's ruling sales and streaming and rising considerably on YouTube and the radio. If we're looking for whole Song of the Summer predictions, this would be the easiest bet. And I'm not seeing what's challenging it anytime soon. That's What I Like by Bruno Mars is holding on to number 2, sure, but its streaming and YouTube are faltering, sales took a considerable hit, and while it's still dominant on the radio, there's no guarantee for how much longer it will be dominant there. Now, you'd think that would make it vulnerable to I'm the One by DJ Khaled featuring, Justin Bieber, Quavo, Lil Wayne, and Chance the Rapper, that whole posse, but it's still at number 3 as it got slightly outstripped on YouTube, and it hasn't quite caught up in airplay just yet, despite stronger sales and streaming. Then we had the boost up for Humble by Kendrick Lamar up to number 4, which if you look at the sales numbers seems to be a little bit startling, but the streaming and YouTube are solid and it's still picking up airplay despite all odds. Compare this to Shape of You by Ed Sheeran, which fell to number 5 because it's losing in all categories by a considerable margin. Even though radio will be slow to let this one go, it is on its way out pretty slowly. Then we have the revival for Mask Off by Future to number 6, likely at least helped by the remix with Kendrick Lamar, thanks to a big boost on YouTube, and still pretty solid on-demand streaming. And yet that can only compensate for sluggish radio and weak sales for so long. I'm not sure it'll be enough here. Then you got the boost for Stay by Zed and Alessia Cara up to number 7, no surprise there, given that it had a solid sales week and it's always had good airplay, but it looks to have a bit of streaming traction too. This will probably stick around a little bit longer. Hell, it overtook Something Just Like This by the Chainsmokers and Coldplay at number 8, which looks like it is finally peaked on the radio and poor sales knocked it back this week. Might be a similar case for EXO Tour Life by Lil Uzi Vert falling down to number 9, or at least I hope so, because while it is still dominant on YouTube and streaming, it's got pretty much nothing anywhere else. Compared to It Ain't Me by Kygo and Selena Gomez, back into the top 10 yet again for pretty much the opposite reasons. Decent sales and even better airplay while the streaming is pretty much garbage. Which will be the first to drop out? That's anybody's guess, but that takes us to our losers and dropouts. In the latter category, we had a few really big ones. Love on the Brain by Rihanna, Both by Gucci Mane featuring Drake, I Feel It Comin' by The Weeknd featuring Daft Punk, I Don't Wanna Live Forever by Zayn featuring Taylor Swift, Bounce Back by Big Sean, The Weeknd by Brantley Gilbert, and Yeah Boy by Kelsey Ballerini. They're all gone. And that trend of big departures seems to be kind of continuing, as Rockabye by Clean Bandit featuring Sean Paul and Anne-Marie slipped down to 41, Cold by Maroon 5 featuring Future went to 44, sooner the better that's gone, and Paris by the Chainsmokers fell to 53. The rest of our losers, they're a little bit more small time. From the debut of Rollin' from Calvin Harris featuring Khalid and Future going to 91, to the return of My Old Man by Zac Brown Band slipping down to 98. But there were a few surprises here too. Human by Rag & Bone Man fell to 89. I honestly thought it might have a little bit more momentum. At My Best by Machine Gun Kelly featuring Hailee Steinfeld went to 87. Again, momentum, and that album did just drop even if it was terrible. And Elements by Kendrick Lamar fell to 83. I think my surprise here is more that it stuck around this long. Oh, Kendrick's got a couple album tracks that will likely make the year-end list. At this rate, they're just sticking around. I'm actually kind of okay with that. Of course, he's not the only one, which takes us to our gains and returning entries. And for some ungodly reason, Guile Chester by Drake is back in 84. It can't be because of the bombing in Manchester, right? Actually, turns out it wasn't due to some performance. He's not the only returning entry, because on the one hand, we got Weak by AJR somehow came back to 96. But on the other hand, on the flip side, Either Way by Chris Stapleton came to 97, even if, again, I don't expect it to stick around. Then we have Subime La Radio by Enrique Iglesias featuring Decimar Bueno and Zion and Lennox. And you can likely thank Despacito for paving the way for this to come back. Now, our gains, on the other hand, a little bit less explainable. Sure, I guess it's not all that surprising that No Promises by Cheat Codes featuring Demi Lovato went to 74 off the debut, as did the the huge boost for Bad Liar by Selena Gomez, up 27. But why the radio has latched on to Now or Never by Halsey in the wake of the upcoming album to push it to 26, I have no idea. It's not that good. Similar case for You Look Good by Lady Antebellum, which is barely country and has no consistent quality on the Hot 100. And same thing for Thunder by Imagine Dragons, going back to 82. I can at least kind of understand why Attention by Charlie Puth went up to 35, because at least with that groove, it's probably his most tolerable song. But anyway, where things get a little bit more clear come in some of our new arrivals. Starting off with number 94, Boy by Brice.
Way too fast, you're gonna drop the ball, hit the wall, and break some hearts like glass. I know you will, 'cause you're a part of me, and a part of you who will always be a boy.
So I've said in the past that I've struggled to like Brice songs a fair bit, especially in comparison with many of his peers that play to a rougher, more spacious sound, like say Eric Church or Kit Moore. Most of that I tied back to the songwriting, but going into this, I also started wondering where Brice would pivot in an increasingly uncertain country atmosphere right now. Turns out he didn't bother pivoting at all, instead of relying on pretty gentle touches of electric guitar, hints of pedal steel, and muffled drums for a pretty simple but effective song dedicated to his young son. It's very much in the instrumental ballpark for which he's familiar. The ending of this track, I will admit, feels a tad abortive, but maybe because I've always been a bit of a sucker for father-son songs, this kind of clicks for me in its straightforward, plain-spoken realism. There's acknowledgement that things are gonna go wrong, and that he'll be able to work through it regardless, which I think is a hell of a lot more potent and compelling than just papering over what might come ahead, even if it's good or bad. I'm not quite sure how long this is gonna stick around. Brice tends to have a hit-and-miss attitude with the charts, but honestly, I kind of hope it does. It's a good song, check it out. Number 92, The Dance by Lauren Duski.
But I'd have had to miss a dance.
Okay, here's a bit of advice. If you're gonna sing Garth Brooks at karaoke, there are two songs you should not sing. First is Friends in Low Places. Pretty obvious. It's played out, especially at country joints. If your DJ isn't good, you're gonna get the 7-minute version that just goes on entirely too long with that third verse that practically nobody knows. The other song is The Dance, the ballad that many consider one of Garth Brooks' signature songs. Even he considers it that. And even if you can pull it off, and it's harder than you think, it's one of those songs that the lead artist embodies so powerfully that any cover feels like a cheap imitation. You shouldn't do it. So when Lauren Duski decided that for the finale, the voice to sing this song, look, it's just not the best idea, especially when you change the key. And sure, she does a good enough job with it, but it feels too clean and bright than the original. I'm not a fan about how the pedal steel's integrated, just kind of sits there in the mix, and the whole arrangement lacks the intensity, and especially the minor keys that made the original so striking, especially on the final notes in the outro. I mean, props are aiming high for a really great song. It's one of my favorite Garth Brooks songs, but there are some mountains that you just should not try. And for me, this is one of them. Number 77, Most Girls by Hailee Steinfeld.
Not too hard to say. I wanna be like most girls. I wanna be like most girls. I wanna be like
Okay, if there's one trend in music distribution that I would want to kill right now, actually there are several, and it'd probably start off with the whole asinine promotion of playlists as a replacement for albums. Thank you so very much, Drake. But right after that would be the consistent stream of re-releases and reissues that makes tracking what songs actually made an album a living nightmare for me. Case in point, I first heard about Hailee Steinfeld's Love Myself back in 2015 as part of her debut EP, Haze. But it turns out this EP was re-released twice. First to bring on a feature from DNCE that went nowhere. Second to greatly expand on that track listing and add Starving, a song that has a shot at making my worst list for 2017 for one of the worst drops I've heard in recent memory. In any case, this is apparently the lead-off single for her upcoming debut album, or who knows, they might re-release Haze again, but with the marketing framed as yet another female empowerment anthem. And honestly, can we put a cap in this brand of tropical sound, especially when you're gonna drown it all out in reverb anyway, with the same pitch shifting that I feel like I've been hearing for the past 3 years over and over again. I'm not denying that there is some groove here that makes this tolerable, but the melody is so muted that I can't see myself remembering this outside of the heavier elements on the hook, which, yeah, I'll admit I do kind of like. But really, it's the lyrics that spur the most reaction out of me, because there is a contradiction at its core that's pretty amusing, I gotta be honest. For as much as Hailee Steinfeld tries so hard to stress girls can do or say anything they want, they can even change their bodies if they want to. That's a pretty dynamic step for this sort of song, really stretching for that whole universality to the point in the second verse, she's celebrating the girls that are sleeping as celebrating life, because inaction does that. It's not all girls on the hook, it's most girls, where Hailee Steinfeld makes it clear that she's not explicitly part of that group, stressing that she has to play to win at life. I don't know, kind of paraphrase Animal Farm, the feel I get from the song is everyone is equal, but some are more equal than others. The song that the girl who wants to be popular would sing to get access to the popular clique while showing some deference. Not helped by the fact that Hailee Steinfeld is pretty underwhelming and nondescript as a singer on this song. Gotta be honest, it's not all that offensive, I kind of dig the groove. It's clear that it was trying to say something more and kind of missed the mark, but again, for me, not really sticking the landing. Not good, but not bad either. Number 76, Yours If You Want It by Rascal Flatts. So Rascal Flatts put out a new album. Here's my question. Why the hell are Rascal Flatts still a thing? I've never been a fan of this pop country group, mostly because Gary LaVox is a grating vocalist and they've shoveled out a lot of forgettable songs over the past decade and a half, with their last record trying to push in bro country cliches to embarrassing effect. But given that pop country seems to have slid back into fashion, maybe their newest song wouldn't suck? Honestly, it actually is better than I expected, but I'm still hesitating to call this all that good. For one, it seems like Rascal Flatts decided to forget that past decade even happened, just go back to the brighter tones and swell that filled their mid to late 2000s work. Maybe a little bit more reverb around some of the edges and some millennial whoops. And sure, there is a tempo and energy to this track, but it's not like there's texture or any real driving momentum to it, most because Gary LaVox starts belting early and doesn't really modulate. It just gets exhausting as production with no serious weight to it. And maybe it's just me, but when you pair it with lyrics that are paying so broadly and wanting to give everything to this girl, I find it really hard to get pulled into the mood and atmosphere. Looks points to returning to a song and a sound that actually kind of works, and to their credit, it does sound more organic than their last album. I can't really hear drum machines on this track, that's a plus, but compared to the pop country that I actually like, this just kind of leaves me cold. Not a Rascal Flatts fan. Sorry. Number 66, Money on You by Chris Blue. So for as much as Lauren Duski charted on the Hot 100, including a second hit this week that actually landed higher than this one because of enormous sales, and yes, we'll get to that, she didn't win The Voice this year. Now that prize goes to Chris Blue, with this being his original song, and honestly, I'm not at all impressed. Yeah, I like groovy 80s disco, but The Weeknd, this guy is not. He's got an impressive falsetto, mostly, but for songs with this sort of groove to have punch for me, you didn't have some vocal tightness and intensity, whereas here, this guy kind of reminds me more of Chris Martin, especially with all the warbling that he does over the symbols of highlight that I really couldn't stand. And yeah, I'm not really expecting a lot of the lyrics here, but just like with the majority of songs coming from The Voice, it's pretty damn thin and flimsy. And like with most winners on The Voice, I wouldn't expect to hear this guy ever again. Sorry. Number 47, Crying in the Club by Camila Cabello.
Your tears as they fall, baby. Ain't no crying in the club. Hey, hey, with a little fat, hey. Your tears turn to ecstasy. Ain't no crying in the club. Ain't no crying in the club. Ain't no crying in the club.
Of all the new entries coming out this week, this was probably the one I was dreading the most, because I've made it no secret that I'm not a fan of Camila Cabello back when she was with Fifth Harmony, and everything that she's released in collaboration with artists like, say, Shawn Mendes or Machine Gun Kelly has been mediocre to outright awful. And yet, for some bizarre reason, these songs were hits, and she was then marketed as the most bankable star of the group, despite her pitchy delivery and her complete inability to consistently stay on key, with this being her lead-off single co-written by Sia, and man, you can tell how actually I'm a little bit stunned that Sia never took the lead on this, because it sounds like a Sia song, because from the vocal inflections to the range to the very hollowed out vocal production that piles on the multi-tracking, it's hard to tell that Camila Cabello is singing here, at least until you get to the hook where she's belting and she tries and mostly fails convincingly against these tropical tones, the blocky horns, a chunky beat, and an interpolation of Christina Aguilera's Genie in a Bottle that reminds me of a much tighter and a much better pop song. That is one of the frustrating things with this song. If the tempo had been kicked up a little bit more, it actually could have had some potential to be a halfway decent track, but as it is, just feels kind of listless, doesn't really go anywhere. The one credit I could give it to are the lyrics, which both partners are finding some vestige of sanctuary in the club after getting dumped. But if you're gonna try for that sort of song, why not make the song have the momentum of a really good club song? So yeah, believe it or not, I actually don't hate this, and I imagine a lot of you thought I would, but that's more because it's a Sia track more than anything else. I don't really hear a lot of Camila Cabello here, and frankly, Sia's done better than this, so kind of meh overall. Number 46, Swish Swish by Katy Perry featuring Nicki Minaj.
Can't touch this. Another one in the casket.
So I can't be the only one who thinks that the whole rollout to that new Katy Perry album isn't going particularly smoothly, can I? Sure, Chained to the Rhythm was okay, but the backlash to Bon Appetit has only grown bigger, and the release of yet another single with a featured guest appears suspiciously like an attempt to pull out of a tailspin. But hey, this had some buzz, it was promising going in, and can I say that I'm kind of underwhelmed by this? For all the hype that is apparently this is Katy Perry's response to the overwrought beef with Taylor Swift, which I think was just tabloid nonsense, it's not like Katy's hushed delivery is all that impressive or imposing, especially opposite Nicki Minaj, who yet again retreads over the Remy Ma beef with, at this point, just been played out as all hell. Compared to the whole Fatboy Slim sample that opens up the song and occasionally punctuates it, and the opening with the piano that opens up to the sparse snap and fizzy beat, Katy Perry is easily the least impressive part of this song, and certainly not able to back up the assertions that she's a courtside killer queen that's putting people in a casket. At least at Taylor Swift, I could buy her at least getting on the court herself. But I think the larger issue is that the writing of the song repeatedly references so many other tracks. Not just Nicki interpreting Juicy by Biggie Smalls, but also a hook that references Another One Bites the Dust by Queen and You Can't Touch This by MC Hammer. All three of these songs are more interesting overall. Plus, the subliminals that Katy is throwing here are just kind of odd. Saying that a tiger doesn't need opinions from a shellfish or a sheep, or comparing Taylor Swift to an expired coupon. I'm sorry, look, I can't take any of this all that seriously. Most because it feels so slick and soft, to be honest. I think I even prefer Bad Blood to this, the original, not the remix. Because while that song might have been clumsy, Taylor Swift could at least pull it off. This, honestly, it's more forgettable than anything. And for a diss song, that's a problem. Number 43, Deja Vu by Lauren Duski.
I can't escape the love we made, the fights we had, the slamming doors and broken glass. And just like that, it all comes back to you. Deja vu.
You know, I don't expect anyone from The Voice to really stick around these days, but it always seems very telling when the highest charting song isn't from the winner. And honestly, I might like it a little bit better than what Chris Blue put together. For one, Duski is a potent singer. You can tell that she's nailing the sort of piano ballad with the subtle strings, hitting the balance between elegance and lingering damage that comes with the post-breakup song where she's remembering and just wishing that he would come back, which for the record is not Deja Vu, especially in this case. If she's recalling falling in love and then fighting and then moments of real conflict, that's very different than this sort of wistful, lonely remembrance. If that was true Deja Vu, it'd be that she was going through the same sort of situations with a different guy that was so similar it could trigger something like that memory. But again, it's The Voice here, and even if Lauren Duski did write herself this song, it's bound to feel a little bit thin. It's not really bad, I don't mind the instrumental, but again, I'm not gonna remember this. And finally, number 42, Strip It Down by Liam Payne featuring Quavo.
There's a lot of people in the crowd, but only you can dance to me. So put your hands on my body and swing that crown for me. Baby, you know I love it when the music's loud, but come and strip that down for me. Yeah, 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 yeah.
That down, girl. Love when you hit the ground.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So now we got the last One Direction member stepping up to the plate for his breakout song. Louis went electro-pop, Zayn went towards R&B and not very well at that, Niall went towards folk, Harry stepped towards classic rock, and Liam... See, I was told going into this song that it sucked, that it was embracing DJ Mustard gang vocals and a stripped-back snap against faint tinkles of piano. It was trying to embrace a sound that was both outdated and yet completely unconvincing coming from Liam Payne of One Direction. And yet, is it a bad thing that I'm not hating this? I'm not saying that it's great or anything, because everything I said about the instrumental is completely true, especially when you tack on the pitch-shifted vocals and Quavo's generally forgettable verse, but it's telling that Liam, he interpolated It Wasn't Me from Shaggy, because all Liam's performances kind of reminds me of an early to mid-2000s hip-hop crossover from the boy bands of that time, just with the sexuality turned up a little bit. And unlike Zayn, Liam actually seems to be having fun, and his lyrics have a pretty solid cadence and flow to them that I actually kind of really like, letting charisma do more work than anything else in the song. Yeah, the production is completely dated, and whatever he says to strip it down, I keep thinking he's talking about refurbishing his deck, and it's certainly not better than most of what Niall and Harry have been releasing recently. But honestly, I'd probably take this over what Zayn and Louis are putting out right now, and even if it is kind of basic, I wouldn't mind seeing this stick around and play out. It's not bad at all. I kind of want to see where Liam takes this. In fact, you know what? It's a pretty middle-of-the-road week overall. Not a lot of goods and bad, but I'm giving the best to Boy by Lee Brice and honorable mention to Strip It Down by Liam and Quavo. What can I say? It's actually kind of catchy and enjoyable, and I can see this growing on a fair number of people. Worst of the week? Again, not really a lot to stand out here, but I'm giving it to Money on You by Chris Blue and dishonorable mention to Swish Swish by Katy Perry and Nicki Minaj. Most because it's more of a disappointment from the both of them. I don't know, I think expectations going into these songs factored into my picks this week, and given that things seem to be slowing down for the summer, I have no real idea what's going to stick around, but hey, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.